Murphy.
Thanks a lot. I want to ask Mr. McKeown in particular some questions about the cut to the pandemic unemployment payment, and I'm trying to get clarity about facts here. I asked some of these questions of the Taoiseach last week and I didn't get an answer. So I give you a case study. Emma was working 2 days a week for 8 hours and has one child. She was previously earning €192 a week, so less than the €200 pre-COVID-19, and she was getting €222.50 per week in job seekers transitional payment. So her employment earnings was less than 200, but she was getting job seekers transitional payment that brought her up to $417.50. She was then cut to $350 with the pandemic unemployment payment when she lost her job due to the pandemic. The question is now, will her PUP be cut to 203? And will she therefore be forced to go back onto the job seekers transitional payment and in order to go up to 239? In which case you're talking about someone who goes from €417.50 a week to €239 a week.
You're asking me a question in detail there, Deputy, and I don't have the precise answer I have to admit for you. And I will come back to you with that answer. I'll write to you. What I would say is that what we have done generally for people who are in receipt of employment income on most of our schemes, so for example disability allowance, carers, working family payment, one parent family payment, is we haven't adjusted their payment. We've basically allowed the pandemic unemployment payment to $350 substitute for their employment income. So therefore, in the case of someone like Emma, if she was previously on more than or less than €200 a week, she'll still be better off even under the reduction than she would have been prior to that. You've asked me a particular question around the job seeker transition scheme, and I'll just need to check whether that is one of those schemes that is covered, and I will come back to you directly on that.
I mean, in the press statement from your department, it was very explicit for those whose prior employment earnings were up to €199.99 per week, the PUP rate would be €203 per week. Employment earnings is not there by accident. It's quite explicit. So, I mean, it is the case that those who are on less than €200 a week in terms of employment earnings are going to have their PUP cut, regardless of how much they were actually taking in and reliant on a weekly basis in terms of other social welfare payments and so on.
Certainly their pandemic unemployment payment will be cut, but it will be no less, and in most cases it will be more than they earned through employment, Deputy. If they had another social welfare payment, in general the position has been that that social welfare payment continued unchanged and will continue unchanged. As I said, you've asked me a specific question around the job seeker transition scheme, and I just don't have that information with me, but I will check whether that is one of those payments and come back to you.
Okay, I mean, to take a more common case, which is job seekers allowance. So say someone is working 2 days a week on minimum wage, getting just over €160 a week, and getting 3 days of job seekers allowance, bringing into a total income of about €290 a week, but their employment income is less than 200. As I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, they weren't entitled to claim for the 3 days of job seekers allowance when they're on the $350 pandemic unemployment payment. That is the case, isn't it?
That is.
Are they now going to be allowed to claim for 3 days for job seekers allowance on top of the 203 pandemic unemployment payment?
No.
So they're going to be reduced from a total income pre-crisis. They're 290. They go up to 350. That person is going to be reduced to €203.
They'll be reduced to what their employment income was. We will examine those cases, Deputy, and we have. For job seeker casuals, what we have determined is that we will look at paying them casual plus the pandemic unemployment payment, so they will be no worse off. But
if you're saying it's based on the employment income and they're going to be cut and they're not going to be entitled to job seekers allowance on top of it, well then they are going to be worse off.
No, what we've determined, Deputy, is that, and this is the issue which I need to just check with the job seeker transition payment which you mentioned, for people who are in casual employment, we will actually pay them the casual plus the pandemic unemployment payment, because the commitment given was that people wouldn't be worse off. So that's what we are doing. I just want to confirm that that's the case in the job seeker transition scheme, but it should be.
And in the case of someone whose nominal wage, say January, February of this year, was under €200, but we're relying on tips to go over €200, There's no mechanism for you to take into account those tips.
No.
Okay.
Thanks.
Deputy Murphy.